Wrath of the Magi. Halloween on the borders of the fairylands. The Goblin Queen isn't happy. Tiberius the Magi has been whittling away at her armies all year long, and try as she may, she has not been able to kill him. But she does have a plan. On Halloween, her armies of goblins and spiders will march forth. She has one last bit of black magic to perform before the battle. Back in the lair of the Goblin Queen, the Queen herself stood at the top of her great chamber. The steps leading up to the platform were now covered with jack-o'-lanterns, each of them carved with a crude, hideous visage, and dimly lit with a flickering candle. All her goblins were working, placing hundreds of jack-o'-lanterns and piling bones all around them. The Queen nodded satisfaction, then turned to the great cauldron that bubbled up on top of the platform, and then to the goat that was brought forth. This she examined very carefully. When she asked for an unblemished goat, she darned well meant unblemished, and she'd always double-checked. She smiled again. This one would do. She motioned to the goblins, and the contents of the bubbling cauldron were poured down the steps. Next she took a razor-sharp blade from her belt, and with one swift motion slit the throat of the goat, letting its blood flow and mingle with the cauldron, spilling down the steps and onto the waiting piles of jack-o'-lanterns and bones. Holding her staff in the air, she shouted, "Arise, children of All Hallows, children of Hecate, children of the night. The witching hour approaches. Irissa, Dinna, Od, Etab, Roth, Royo, Niku." For a moment there was an eerie silence in the great chamber. Then there was a light scraping as one of the bones moved. Then another. Then another. Slowly but as surely as the approach of the executioner's sword, the bones started moving, forming into the shape of men. Headless men. Once they had formed from piles of bones into headless soldiers, the headless skeletons then reached down, and each of them took hold of a jack-o'-lantern. Then they picked up the carved pumpkins, lifted them up, and placed them on top of their headless skeletal bodies, the jack-o'-lanterns becoming the heads of these terrifying warriors. Now they were fully formed soldiers of the Goblin Queen. The flickering candlelight became their eyes, and they took up their swords and shields. Each shield bore the Queen's purple and was decorated with the image of a jack-o'-lantern and the Queen's crown over its head. Even veteran goblins in the chamber took a step back as they watched the Queen's army assemble itself. Around 400 jacks now filled the chamber, and then all as one they turned, raised their arms, and saluted the Queen. The Queen then strode through their ranks. She walked down through the great chamber and out towards the exit. As the sun was starting to set, the Queen's army had assembled just outside of the great cave entrance. Thousands of spiders, goblins, and bodies formed the great horde. Everyone assembled gasped, though, as the Queen made her grand exit from the chamber, leading an army of jack-o'-lantern warriors. The Queen was pleased with the turnout, nearly 10,000 all told, including the giant Monotok. Even he could see that it was past time for this action. Many of the dark fairy folk had been feeling the heat from the rangers in Tiberius. This time they would strike back. The golden rays of the sun shone over the banners of the Queen. Each banner was purple, with a jack-o'-lantern in the center covered with a gold crown. The Queen herself stood watching them all parade past her. She turned to her general. General Squamata was the giant of a goblin who stood around 6.5 feet tall. He wore a suit of gleaming bronze plate armor, and he carried 2 large cutlasses. The Queen walked around him, sprinkling a few last charms. "No mortal weapon will pierce your armor. No mortal armor shall resist your blades. Go forth and crush the sons of Adam and their treacherous allies. Bring me the scalp of every gnome in the country. They'll learn who to ally themselves with. All shall be as you say, my Queen." "Excellent. These jacks will be your ace in the hole. We aren't loved, but we will be feared. It's time to remind them that they should fear the darkness."